just ugly and gross. And if they beautify it, people are going to forget. They're not going to know what happened, you know. Yeah.
We don't have a lot of experience as a society in passing on knowledge, but probably the best analogy that we could find was nuclear waste sites in the US and in France. There has been some work done looking at how to preserve information about the site. It seems like the best way is to actually make paper copies of all your documents and put them on acid-free paper and store them in various locations around your country, and so that hopefully there's a record of what was done at the site, and that somebody in the future will know how to do something there. But there's other ideas that have come up too, in terms of building monuments, signage. Not a lot of work though really done on the idea of oral tradition and the role that myths and legends and storytelling could play. And I think that's something that needs some more work here in Yellowknife, because obviously the Dene have lived here for at least 10,000 years and survived quite well in spite of a whole series of adversities. But I think there's something that we can and should learn from the way that the Dene people have continued to live here, and maybe planting some seeds there in terms of storytelling and so on will help tell people in the future how to properly look after the giant mine.
Future generations have a right to the information they will need to address the legacy of waste left to them by this generation. They have a right to be warned of any danger, to know the history of their home, and to understand what has worked and failed at restoring the land to health. The Yellowknives asked for a perpetual care plan that had a special focus on communicating with future generations. Now, interestingly, at other perpetual care sites, one of the few means of communicating across many generations that worked well was traditional knowledge. For example, Indigenous or Aboriginal traditional knowledge passed from generation to generation has a high fidelity and keeps information alive in a way that written methods of recording just don't. I mean, you know, in your lifespan, you've seen the change from cassettes to floppy disks to hard drives to DVD ROMs or whatever, and now it's solid state stuff. That changes pretty quickly, but traditional knowledge endures in a different state.
A lot of the research that we've done to date focuses on this question of, say, for instance, with nuclear waste repositories, how to communicate 10,000 years in the future using monuments. How do you make knowledge sort of durable and physical in that sense? One of the kind of inspirations for this project is thinking about the ways in which oral traditions and Indigenous knowledge, which has carried knowledge from generation to generation about the land, about culture, about social practices, spiritual knowledge, etc., for thousands of years as well. And how could we mobilize similar types of knowledge transmission practices to deal with this contemporary issue, which is not a happy circumstance and not necessarily the positive kinds of knowledge that we might associate with long-term traditional knowledge and information, but yet one which is absolutely critical for these communities to remember, because they will face the poison and the legacies of this industrial development for extremely long periods of time.
The more we know about the situation, I think the more support we're probably going to get to help us create something for future generations to know, to give them that message. I feel what we need to do today, pretty soon, is to make sure that our future generation know what's down there. How can we tell them? We're trying to find ways. We're talking about it. How can we relay a message that the stuff underground is really dangerous to a point where you shouldn't go near it? We have to come up with some kind of a concept or a story, maybe, something to tell the future that it's really dangerous. And I worry that if we have it written, maybe we won't even speak English at that time, or even our own language, who knows? what it's going to be like in next 5,000 years. I can't imagine. That's just way too far to think about it, but I think we need to tell it so that the story will be told over and over and the story to stay the same.
If the families or the grandparents are sharing stories with their children, some children may have some memory, some stories of this place, but 10,000 years from now there might be absolutely no memory at all. So I think the Yellowknives are going to have to work on something that's going to be there forever.
Yeah, as long as I can remember, we were always told stories, especially in the evenings where we had nothing to do. We're out on the land, and animal stories, Yamoja stories, and we learn from it. At Willowday site, there's an area there that we have a story on him. Long ago, when the animals communicated with humans, and the animals were huge. And this big beaver, he made a dam right at the mouth of the river, and the people were living on each side. And the beaver made that dam, and it blocked the flow of the water. It started to flood the area, and the people started dying. And they didn't know what to do or how to get rid of that beaver. So they asked Yamoja for his help. He took a tree from the side of the river and yanked it out of the ground, and he made like it was like a shovel, I guess. He kind of scooped that beaver on the side, and it cleared the water, and the water started flowing. That's why right now there's, right at the mouth of the river, there's two outcrops of rocks like this. And they say that it was Yamoja that did that pushed the dam aside. And he took his shovel and spiked it into the ground. And now there's a big spruce tree that's growing there. And it's probably one of the biggest trees in this area.
And that tree is revered by the Yellowknives Dene. You'll see in the bark of the tree there'll be coins. There's a crucifix hanging there. There's a whole mat of litter underneath it that I'm sure if you dug down, which we're not going to do, but if you were to go down, you would find other types of offerings that predate when the first white people came into the north. So you'd probably find stone tools there. Other Dene talk about Yamoja chasing the giant beaver, and it gouged out a big trench, and that became the Mackenzie River. The story that got me really interested in whether or not there's a sort of a basis for that story, you know, can you other than having it as a story or a legend, is there some basis in geology and geomorphology to explain this particular place here? And I think that there is. I think that at some point in the past, it may have been 7 or 8 or 10,000 years ago, there was an ice dam that kept the glacial meltwaters to the northeast of here, kept it back. So there was Glacial Lake McConnell, there was an ice dam, and a whole lot of water back up in there to the northeast of here. And at some point, I think that ice dam broke and that water came rushing down through here. And if there were people around that witnessed that, that perhaps is how they explained how that particular phenomena happened.
I think we need to come up with a story. I think that's probably one of the best ways that we'll be able to tell the story about Giant Mine is to create a story or a legend. And I think legends are created by events, I said. So this thing that's underground, the way I look at it, the way I see it, it is a giant monster. It is a monster for me. It's maybe bigger than a monster. Once it comes out, it will destroy everything in front of it. So we could take a look at it like that, like in a cloud of dust that comes out of the ground, you know, as it goes, whichever way the wind blows. That's where it's going to kill all these people. Forever in my language, we say hot'ahlon. It's hot'a means right now, and then you go hlon. Forever there's no stop to it. It's like going out into the universe and that's it. I can't imagine that far. It's hard for me to think in that way, but it is important. That's why I think it's important for everyone to get involved and start talking about it. When we had that healing ceremony last year at the mine site, I was crying. I was crying because I was saying I'm sorry. Even though I never did it, I feel sorry for the land. You know what? Maybe we're not part of creating that, but it really affects me. I can't believe that. What they've done to the land is not right at all. It isn't right. All for the sake of money. All for financial gain. That's all it was. They don't care what they did to the land. Not like us Dene people. We really care for our land. I think a lot of times when we're working with the diamond industry right now, there's so many things we've learned from the past that we don't want to happen.